What does 2025 look like as an encore performance for Dan Quinn and Jayden Daniels? We're exploring the state of the Washington Commanders roster today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Joe, happy, day 2? Do you guys have media today for OTAs?
We did that yesterday.
Yesterday? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm only getting media for the first time today. So happy Kyle gets first OTA media day to you.
You excited to find out maybe an important player's hurt or somebody important's not there? Or
No, I know everybody's there other than Jalen Ramsey, who's too busy tweeting out his number on the number of days away from June 1st it is so he can get traded. That's
okay. All right. So
yeah.
Pins and needles on that. Maybe
Ron Armstead retired and showed up the OTAs before Jalen Ramsey did.
Oh, there you go. So Ramsey's played his last snap.
Yeah.
Well, at least you didn't find out that Joey Bosa's hurt already. So, great start.
Yeah, come on. This is not a surprise, right?
Right, but
you don't need to be healthy now. You need to be healthy in the fourth quarter in December. Is when you
that would be nice. That would be nice, but it'd also be nice for him to not have a calf injury that's going to keep him out until camp.
Tomato.
So,
but it's not a Dolphins or Bills day here on the show. It's a Washington Commanders day here on the show as we are reviewing the offseason moves and the roster for the 2025 Washington Commanders. Fresh off of a 12-win season and appearance in the NFC Championship game. We are doing our roster assessment series, third team in the NFC East this week. This is our third division. We did two other divisions the past 2 weeks. We're categorizing players as roster cornerstones, quality starters, sufficient level starters, quality depth players, replacement level players, rookies, incomplete evaluations, non-roster caliber players, and practice squad caliber players. With the intent being at the end of the road, we have numerical values associated with all those things, and we can have roster power rankings and the start of training camp and look at how good these teams are. And today's Washington's Day in the Sun, Joe.
How dare you say this is not a Bills and Dolphins podcast? We can collaborate over both franchises taking Super Bowl losses at the hands of Washington, right? So, we're just trying to pay homage to the history. That's all. That's all it is.
Well, consider that homage paid, ready to move on from paying homage. Let's start with the skill group in Washington around Jayden Daniels. The quarterback conversation we will do separate from the rest of it because of how unique the quarterback position is. But this team was busy. They traded for Deebo Samuel. They bring back Zach Ertz. Eckler was re-signed, I believe. My memory serves me correctly. Was that a 1-year deal?
I think it was a 2-year deal. Yeah.
Was it a 2-year deal?
Yeah.
Bring back Marcus Mariota as the backup quarterback. They draft Jalen Lane. They add KJ Osborne. So some new pieces around to Jayden Daniels this offseason.
Yeah, I'm interested to see, of course, Deebo Samuel and how he inserts into this lineup where, you watch Cliff Kingsbury run this offense last year, and it's a lot of quick game, get the ball out of Jaden's hands. And boy, they've got a dynamic yards after catch player in Deebo Samuel, who had admitted that he kind of lost his focus a little bit and added some weight, and seems like he's back where he needs to be in terms of playing shape. And, even through that, he was still a really good yards after catch player for the 49ers, over 8 yards after catch per reception, pretty much every year of his career. I think it was 8.7 last season. And so getting the ball into his hands, I think, can certainly help this offense to complement some of the vertical components that obviously exist with Terry McLaurin and then Noah Brown, who gives them a height, weight, speed guy down the field. And so you got some field stretchers. You got underneath targets in Ertz, who, has always been a zone buster, quarterback friendly, be available. I'm sure that'll continue with Samuel, and a little bit more speed with Jalen Lane now in the mix, a draft pick out of Virginia Tech. So I see the vision with the passing offense. I'm really curious with this running back room, where between Robinson, Eckler, McNichols, and Rodriguez, I think they all had their moments last year. I mean, obviously a lot more consistency from Robinson and Eckler, who were the main guys, but there was a McNichols game. There was a Rodriguez game. And this team, there were some rumblings that maybe even at the end of the first round, they could have been in the running back market. Well, they didn't do that, right? They obviously drafted Josh Conerly, but they're pretty much running it back with this group of running backs on an offense that Jayden Daniels led this team in rushing. And I don't think that's where they want to be. I think, of course, you want Jayden Daniels to run the ball and that to be part of his identity as a player, but leading the team is probably a little more than what you're looking for. So I'm looking to see how these running backs distribute the workload and where the ceiling is in this group, because I feel like we know what a lot of these players are, and maybe the ceiling's tied to the evolution of the passing game and hopefully an improved offensive line.
Yeah, I think the offensive line unit is going to be such a big story for me for what this group looks like. It is ironic, though, for Jayden Daniels leading the team in rushing. These guys had pretty healthy clips and productivity independently, whether it's Robinson or Eckler or McNichols or Rodriguez. Like, none of them averaged less than 4.3 yards per attempt last year, right? But you also know that's part of Cliff, right? And his DNA and his NFL experience, having Kyler and quarterback run game being a piece of that. So I don't know that you're ever going to see a traditional turn around and hand the ball off a whole bunch of times and feed a guy 250 plus touches. And I think it's good that you have some interchangeability with the room. But I think the running game is going to go as Jayden Daniels, both in designed and outside of structure runs, is going to allow it to. I think that's really where you're going to get a lot of your most productive chunks and pops in the run game.
A couple of young players that I'm really paying attention here in this group is Luke McCaffrey at receiver. It was a mid-round pick. Some appeal with the quarterback transition to receiver, the athleticism, the name, obviously, and I think he could take a year or two step. And then also a guy that we both like, Ben Sinnott, the tight end, played in 17 games, only caught 5 passes last year. And it's, Ertz has established himself as the volume piece at tight end, and John Bates has emerged as one of the better blocking tight ends in the league. And so I think that maybe complicates Sinnott's role a little bit, but there's a lot of ceiling, and they took him, was in his second round pick.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a vision here, and maybe that vision is post Ertz, but as I think about where this group from last year can take a step, it's got to be rooted in those 2 young players.
Well, and McCaffrey was the 100th overall pick.
Yeah, those are pretty high picks.
Those were not nothing additions. And you mentioned John Bates. John Bates signed a 3-year, $21 million contract. So, and the divide in the role of what John Bates does versus what Ertz does, and I think Ben Sinnott as I think maybe a guy that blurs the lines between the 2 positions a little bit. I think you've got a really good complementary group of skills in your tight end room. So I think that tight end group has what it needs and can survive kind of an interruption with one of those players. Now, if they get hammered with injuries and miss 2 of those guys, I don't think there's a lot of tight end rooms that could do well through that kind of adversity. But the other thing I'm just keeping an eye on, Joe, and you talk about passing game weapons, targets vacated. Olamide Zaccheaus, 64 targets vacated from last year's group, and then Diami Brown with 40. So you have over 100 vacant targets from last year's passing attack.
Deebo.
To go Deebo. Terry, I believe I saw this number. Yeah. Terry had 13 touchdowns, which is 1/3 of his career touchdowns came last year. And he did so on the least amount of targets he's had since his rookie season. So you talk about Ertz and now Deebo with those 100 vacant targets, and Terry's already got the ball less than he had since 2019. I think that's one thing that Washington and specifically Jayden can really hang their hat on for how they operated last year, was spreading the ball around and getting the right guy the ball and not being too one-dimensional with who's touching the football.
All right. We will see how Jayden Daniels evolves in year 2. And a lot of that's going to be tied to this offensive line where they've made some significant additions. We're talking O-line, D-line here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with us. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never better time to get in on the action, and FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. I've been having a ton of fun. We hit big on a parlay last night with the Pacers and Knicks game, and they actually had a boost available on the app. If you go onto the app, you can usually find some type of a boost, and I got like a 30% profit boost, and we hit on a nice parlay, made that game even more exciting. And of course, we have some more action tonight for the Thunder and Wolves. I'm going in on some overs for Anthony Edwards and SGA. And folks, if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Did you have any reaction to the college football 26 cover?
It's those two receivers, right? The Bama one and it seems like in the Ohio State one.
Baby-faced assassins on the perimeter for Alabama and Ohio State.
Not even draft eligible, Kyle.
Nope. Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith.
So I always try my very best to like not care about non-draft eligible players because there's so much inventory to deal with. But those guys are hard to ignore, man.
Just you can care, but you can allow yourself to care about those two.
It's impossible to not see them when they play.
Yeah.
Smith is 4 for Ohio State, man. It's my guy. It's my
Ryan
guy.
Williams is 2 for Alabama. All right, offensive line, Washington. Big move here, obviously trading for Laremy Tunsil from the Houston Texans. Nick Allegretti, Tyler Biadasz, when healthy, Sam Cosmi.
Yeah.
And then wild card dealer's choice at right tackle as things currently stand. Either Brandon Coleman or Andrew Wiley or Josh Conerly could be viable players to start at right tackle, depending on how they choose to navigate the Cosmi injury.
Yeah.
Michael Dieter is depth player. Nate Herbig is depth player. When they're healthy, I think their 1 through 8's a very sturdy looking group.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good way to look at it. Their 1 through 8, if healthy, looks strong. The challenge is we've got to work through this Cosmi injury early on, and there's a lot of different pathways that they can do this, but I think you start that conversation by asking yourself who's going to play right tackle. And Brandon Coleman played left tackle last year, so that's a transition. Josh Conerly was exclusively a left tackle at Oregon, who at the Senior Bowl played on the right side, and that looked like he was swimming uphill a little bit. And we both love Conerly. Like, I love Conerly, but you can't deny that he's a guy that played left tackle in college, and in our first exposure to him at right tackle, it didn't look good. So do you go back to like Andrew Wiley in that spot and say, Coleman, can you play guard? Like, how do you figure this out? I think is going to be a challenge.
Can I give you an insight or a thought that I just had on what is probably how I would hope it plays out if I were Washington?
What you got?
I would hope whoever you choose to play at right tackle is not interrupted when Cosmi comes back, which for me would probably disqualify Andrew Wiley from, like,
even though it's your most proven player at right tackle.
Well, whoever I put at right tackle, I want to be able to stay at right tackle.
Well, you traded for Laremy Tunsil. He's your left tackle. And you just drafted Josh Conerly in the first round. So so I think you got to
rooting for him to play.
Yeah. And I think, like, of course we acknowledge that there was issues, but that doesn't mean he can't do it. And like part of that conversation when they brought him in after they flew him in after drafting in the first round surely had to be, well, you're going to have to play right tackle. Let's start working on this right now so we get the muscle memory and the technique down.
Yeah.
But there's not a spot for Tunsil, Conerly, and Coleman can't all play tackle. Someone's going to have to play guard. And so Cosmi's like your dude at right guard. You want to elevate the left guard situation, in my opinion, where your ceiling is, And maybe that is Brandon Coleman. Like if it's important to you that Brandon Coleman's a starter, like a long-term starter, which I mean, 3rd-round pick last year that started as a rookie, you might want him to be your left guard. These are kind of good problems to have, but there are dominoes that have to fall into place.
Right. I think it's just getting the right combination of 5 guys. And then whenever you're projecting Cosmi returns, I would hate for Cosmi's return to change the dynamics of more than one position on the offensive line.
Yeah, I think
right. Like you're just hoping Cosmi comes in, he goes into right guard, and whoever was playing right guard is no longer starting.
Yeah. So your path to doing that is,
I mean, it's probably Brandon Coleman's probably the odd man out.
And you just live with him as your swing.
Well, I think Andrew Wiley might be your swing when it's all said and done. I don't have a good answer, but like if Tunsil goes down, you move Conerly to left tackle, and then Wiley plays right tackle, right?
It depends on, I mean, if you don't want to disrupt, dude, I don't know.
It's like if right tackle goes down, okay, you have options to play right tackle. If left tackle goes down, I take the natural left tackle in Conerly and put him at left tackle.
That's difficult if you get 6 games into this thing and he's gelling in at right tackle.
I get it. But would you rather play Brandon Coleman based off of last year's body work, but he allowed like double-digit sacks last year, left tackle.
Right.
Okay.
There's things to sort out with the Washington offensive line. The good news is we have reasonably attractive options.
Well, and I have Tunsil as a cornerstone. I have Allegretti, Tyler Biadasz, Andrew Wiley, all as sufficient level starters. And I know Wiley's a player who's on the decline. Conerly obviously is a rookie. Cosmi, when he's healthy, I think is a quality starter. And then Coleman right now, I would pencil him as quality depth with potential for guard tackle flex. And then I think you have quality depth player in Nate Herbig and Michael Dieter, who I think is center exclusive, is a quality depth, like backup center.
I think I maybe had an epiphany.
Okay.
You know, like whenever you
help me, please.
This might be helpful. Because, you know, when you're assessing teams and what their intentions are, it's what they do that matters. And so let's go through the timeline here. Brandon Coleman was a 3rd-round pick.
Yes.
That he started the whole year at left tackle for Washington.
Yes.
Okay, so that happened. And then they traded for Laremy Tunsil and they drafted Josh Conerly in the 1st round.
Yeah.
They don't care that much about Brandon Coleman starting at tackle, right? It's pretty clear. He's the odd man out. So we got to get Conerly at right tackle. And then
Coleman to play right guard and then just go to the bench when Cosmi comes back.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm
glad we got that figured out. Speaking of things to figure out, this defensive line where there's been transition.
Yeah.
No more Jon Allen. No, who's the Dante Fowler is gone. So our defensive tackle is Daron Payne, who's been a really good starter for them. I'm not sure he's played his best football lately, but he's not 100 years old. He's 29. Javon Kinlaw, which I will openly tell you, I thought they massively overpaid for Kinlaw.
It's 15 per year.
That's insane money for Kinlaw, who I think is at best a interior rush player on long and late downs. Absolute liability against the run. They need to be hoping that Johnny Newton in year 2, who I loved coming out of Illinois, is your running mate for Payne. But you paid Kinlaw like you're going to start this guy and play him 60+% of snaps. You're also counting on Eddie Goldman, who was retired for 2 years, came back and was not good for Atlanta last year, to be part of your mix at nose, with Sheldon Day, who's been in the league for 9 years, and I think he's played for 9 different teams. Like, we have some things to figure out here on the interior, but I think it's
like that, man.
Well, because he's had one of the most. They have Kevin Seymour's the same player, but at corner. He's like 31 years old, has never signed a meaningful contract in the league, but somehow is still around. It's like, what is going? How do you get that job, right? So you got some,
and they have the quarterback version of that with Josh Johnson.
Boy, he was meant to be there, right? He was meant to be. He was meant to be there.
Yeah.
So I think you need Johnny Newton year 2 to be a thing, and you need Daron Payne to get back to like where he was 2 years ago for the interior.
I don't think there's a more important player for Washington's pass rush than Johnny Newton. Because you look at the edge guys, Dorrance Armstrong, Dietrich Wise, Cleveland Farrell, I mean, you could even put Jalen Holmes, and Jacob Martin's a little bit of a different stylistic player. These are all like heavy-handed. These are not twitchy guys as pass rushers, right?
No,
None of them are.
none of them.
And that's Dan Quinn defense, and I understand that. And Frankie Luvu will have something to say about pass rush and disruption. But you mentioned what you felt Javon Kinlaw's best role was, but even through that spectrum, I don't think he's a super appealing, disruptive player. And Daron Payne, as you said, is a good player who's maybe past the best chapter of his career. So Newton should be the ascending player who had that on tape. And I think that makes Johnny Newton the X factor for this front. Because if he doesn't make the leap, then I think Frankie Luvu then assumes the role of your probably your best pass rushers, your other off-ball linebacker.
Thinking about an offense game planning against this front in terms of pass protection, there's not a lot that you're worried about. I'll come out and say it. Like I think this is a defensive line that is lacking big time players that are going to dictate protection schemes and get after the quarterback like they need to.
So their scheme's going to dictate the protection schemes, and that's where Dan Quinn, as the defensive coach, is saying, I'm going to coach the right plays. And it's a hard way to make a living, right? It's a lot easier, but I'm just saying that's what, and I get why Dan Quinn, as a defensive coach with a good scheme, feels that way. But there's certain coaches that say, I'm going to push the right buttons at the right time and make the right calls, and our scheme's going to do it, versus having guys that take it. It's the Jimmies or it's the Kyles and Joes versus X's and O's debate. And I think this is a team very clearly with this personnel grouping that they have. Dan Quinn's banking on the X's and O's transcending the Kyles and Joes with their front.
I guess he's done quite well for himself under that strategy. So he has that in his argument. I'm curious to see how this comes together. All right, we are going to get into the rest of the defense, the back seven here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with us.
Couple of really likable guys in Frankie Luvu, Mikey Sandersill, Trey Amos as a rookie coming in. I'm still a champion for Quan Martin. I know Washington fans despised him when he played under Ron, right?
He started for him all year last year, man.
Yes, he did. But he was horrible as a rookie with Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera, and they were ready to punt on Quan Martin. And just hang in there.
He's the only one that survived that last draft class, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, you're going to make me pull up the draft history.
Forbes is gone. Strongberg's gone. What do they have from that 23 class? I'm pretty sure it's Quan Martin. Might be it.
2023. Emmanuel Forbes, 16th overall. 16th overall, Joe.
Bad.
Oh, no. It's going to get worse. Quan Martin, 47th.
Yep. All right.
Still ticking. Ricky Stromberg, 97.
Bye.
Jayden Daniels, 118.
Bye.
He's in Miami right now. It's like their fourth string tackle, guard. KJ Henry, 137.
Bye.
Right. He's on his fourth team right now. Chris Rodriguez, 193.
All right. We're still here. Had a big game at the end of the season last year. He was hurt to start.
And then Andre Jones at 233.
Well, let's hope we have a depth running back and a starting free safety to show for this.
And you even get the 22. Dotson, Phi Mathis.
Boy.
Sam Howell.
Was that their first three picks?
No, Brian Robinson was the third round pick. I went the fifth. But
all right, you get that.
Kind of the name that, like, he was a full-time starter for you in what, 23?
Yeah. The good news is Adam Peters and Dan Quinn are here, and you don't have to live in that world anymore. But it certainly doesn't help your current situation. Like, you'd love to have a few more hits along the way from those previous two draft classes to fill out this roster. But this linebacker duo of Bobby Wagner and Frankie Luvu is exciting. Bobby Wagner, man, the guy feels like he's ageless and
timeless.
Man, like I thought maybe like early in his Rams year, like maybe he was fading, but he goes back to Seattle and gets to Washington. It feels like this guy's playing that extremely high level. And then Frankie Luvu just is like the ultimate Dan Quinn player where A pressure player that can do a lot of different things for your defense, brings a lot of juice. I don't think they have much depth at linebacker, but those two, if they're available, it's a heck of a starting pair.
I have 2 questions for you with linebackers.
Mm-hmm.
How much of the Bobby Wagner speculation was just because Josh Allen put him on that poster when we were at the game?
Kyle, we were physically there, and we both looked at each other
Some
type of way.
Oh no, Bobby!
Some type of way when that play went down.
Yeah, that was on our end zone too.
Yeah,
wasn't it? It was coming at us.
Yeah, we were like the top bowl, but we were like the bottom of it, and that play happened right underneath us. You're like, oh, like that was Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, it's like who did he do that to? It was Bobby. Oh,
it's like it's when Derwin James missed the one tackle in his whole career at Florida State, and it was on like a national TV game, and everybody lost their mind. It's like, oh, he can't play.
Derwin can't tackle.
Can't tackle.
He got you one time in the open field. Right. And then my other question is, do you remember how much we had to fight 2 years ago about Frankie Luvu?
Yeah, we don't have to do that anymore, right?
We don't have to do that anymore.
All right, good.
You were right. I'm going to give you your flowers. You were right.
Thanks. Wow, it's a big moment.
Quality starter for sure. Would you give any consideration to Frankie Luvu? What would Frankie Luvu have to do to become a cornerstone player for you?
That's such an interesting conversation where it just feels like you know what he is and he's very valuable and useful, but like that cornerstone bucket is so special to me.
Right.
He'd have to be I think he'd have to be Parsons. And I just, with all due respect, and maybe that's the wrong name to invoke, we're talking Washington, right? An NFC East player. But I think that's the type of, if you're this type of guy, I think you have to have that type of impact to get to the cornerstone, as now Commanders fans want to burn down my house, I'm sure, for saying that.
He has 20 and a half sacks and 41 tackles for loss the last 3 years.
Carolina could use this guy, If they gave up the most points in NFL history last year, might have been one to hang on to, Maybe say no to Josie Jewell and keep Frankie Luvu around,
Yeah, a lot of production there. I agree with you with the depth. Kane Medrano, I think he'd be a really nice special teams player for Washington, and I think he has some pass rush or pass coverage, I should say, ability, but you can't play him on early downs at all. It just did not exist on his tape, in my opinion, at UCLA. So I like the Medrano ad for them as a special teams guy and maybe a coverage specialist. And how that fits amongst this secondary will be interesting, because I think it's kind of like the offensive line where you look at it and say, I really like a lot of these individual pieces, but how it all fits together is Dan Quinn's going to have to figure out the right buttons to push here, where Mikey Sandersill, I think, would be best served in the nickel. I know he's not the biggest guy, so your run inserts and run fits as a nickel player at his stature is...
He don't care.
I know he doesn't care, but at the end of the day, big versus little is a thing that happens from time to time. Jonathan Jones, I think, would be best served in the nickel. Quan Martin lived in the nickel early in his career. Marshawn Lattimore, player that's kind of reaching the tail end of the prime of his career, hoping you get him fully healthy this year. Man.
Those playoffs were rough for Lattimore.
But you traded for him and he was never healthy, right? So we
were all stunned that he had a hamstring injury.
I get it.
It's never happened with Marshawn Lattimore.
Trey Amos as an outside guy, I think that you're really looking for him to elevate, because I think that allows you to get a bigger needle mover than Noah Benagany in the slot, who I know played there last year and had his head above water for a player that was an abject disaster for the Dolphins. But I think you can probably get a greater impact by not having that player there, because just the reaction and play processing has not been a strength, and that happens faster in the nickel.
3 quick thoughts here. I am not sleeping on Dominic Hampton as the latest Dan Quinn 220-pound safety convert to linebacker. There's going to be something on the plate for him, so keep your eyes on that. I don't feel like Will Harris is a good replacement for Jeremy Chin. I'm worried about that. And I think this team, if I was a Commanders fan, I would be hoping that the cornerbacks settled out like this. I'd want Lattimore and Amos to be my outside players. I want Sanders still to be my nickel. And Jonathan Jones can be your fill in the blanks guy. Yeah. And I think Noah, like with all due respect to Noah Igbenogany, he got a chance to play in Washington. He found some favor. I don't holding his head above water. I think, a few times he might have been dunked underneath a little, but came up for air. I just would be willing to try different things in the slot because I think there's better options. And Sanders still, Jones, and even like you have some bigger players like your Reeves, Percy Butler, like those are bigger guys. Dom Hampton, like if you want to play big nickel, I think you have that on your menu as well, which is in Dan Quinn's bag. So I hope that they're open to trying some different things with how these cornerbacks settle in.
Yeah, it's just going to be interesting with the familiarity there. There's time on task now, and how does that influence your decision making from personnel standpoint? Are you betting on him being a better player now that he's finally played? Because he came in, he was a late convert to corner. He got drafted as absolute baby. I think he was 20 on draft day when he got drafted.
Yeah.
He's not going to turn 26 until the end of November. So, like, there's still a lot of tread opportunity on the tires for Noah, and that development and the pressure of being a first-round pick in Miami, and it just didn't happen there. Maybe he takes the leap. And if you get in training camp and that's apparent, then roll with Noah. Great. Sure. But as with what body of work that we know right now, I'm really hoping Trey Amos comes in and ends up being a dude, because I think that protects you from Lattimore durability issues. And then I think it makes your fully healthy secondary a lot more of a dynamic group.
High expectations. Year one, you go to the NFC Championship game, win 12 games. Jayden Daniels, all-world rookie. So what do they say? Expectations are a privilege. Washington's earned them. We'll see what Dan Quinn and company has in store for year two.
That's right. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On NFL Scouting. Kyle Krabs, Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your Wednesday. We'll be back again tomorrow to do the reigning Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, and then takes on Friday. We hope to see you then.